The room was cold, the hum of the air conditioning barely audible over the low murmur of conversation. Caroline sat across from Thom Tillis, her fingers curled around a glass of water, though she wasn't thirsty. She hadn't taken a sip since they'd begun this tense meeting. Tom, on the other hand, was too preoccupied to notice. His eyes never left her, piercing, as if trying to measure her resolve. "I don't get it, Caroline," Tom said, his voice strained. "You're standing in front of me, all calm and collected, while our farmers are getting hit hard. These tariffs, they're destroying everything they've worked for. And you're okay with that?" Caroline's eyes flickered, but her face remained a mask of composure. She leaned forward slightly, meeting his gaze. "You're blaming the tariffs for everything that's wrong, Tom. You know better than that. These farmers aren't just dealing with Trump's policies. They've been struggling for years. What we need is a long-term solution, not quick fixes." Tom scoffed, shaking his head. "Long-term solution? That's what you think the voters want to hear right now? They're scared, Caroline. You can't ignore that. What if they can't make it until your long-term kicks in?" Caroline's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm not ignoring it. But short-term panic doesn't fix anything, Tom. It only drives us deeper into this mess." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The problem isn't just the tariffs. It's how we've been treating our farmers like pawns in a game they never asked to play." Tom leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The frustration was palpable, but beneath it was something else, something deeper. "So what? You're saying I'm the one playing the game?" His tone had shifted from anger to something more like disbelief, mixed with a trace of guilt. Caroline straightened in her chair. "You've been playing it for years, Tom. You've got everyone convinced that the way forward is about who can shout the loudest and who can pass the quickest laws. But look where that's gotten us. You think slapping tariffs on everything will solve the problem?" Tom's voice rose. "I never said it would solve everything, but we can't let China walk all over us. And you can't just pretend like it's not affecting our own people. They're losing everything. You don't get it, Caroline." "I do get it," Caroline replied, her voice steady, but with an edge. "But I also see something you don't. A real plan. One that doesn't just target the symptoms, but the root causes. You've got your blinders on, Tom. And I won't apologize for seeing the bigger picture." Tom's eyes flashed with anger, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he pushed his chair back, the scrape of it against the floor harsh in the quiet room. He stood up abruptly, pacing, his mind clearly racing. Caroline didn't flinch. She didn't need to. "This is bigger than your bigger picture, Caroline," Tom snapped, pausing mid-pace to face her. "This is about survival. Farmers don't have time to wait for your long-term solutions. They need answers now. You think you're the only one who cares about them? You think I don't want to protect them?" Caroline's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped lower, colder. "You don't protect anyone, Tom. You protect your own image. You always have. That's why you're so afraid to make the hard decisions." Tom's jaw clenched. He stepped closer, his voice low now, almost threatening. "You really think you can take me down with this, Caroline? You think you can just waltz in here and act like you've got all the answers?" She didn't flinch, her eyes locked on his. "I'm not here to take you down, but I will make sure this mess gets fixed. You've had your chance. And look where it's gotten us. You're too busy trying to hold on to your seat to actually do something meaningful." A silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken tension. Tom's hands were balled into fists at his sides, but Caroline didn't move. The calm in her demeanor only made his fury more apparent. "So what? You're just going to waltz in and take everything over?" Tom said through gritted teeth, his voice tight. Caroline took a slow breath, her voice steady as she stood up, pushing the chair back with deliberate calm. "I'm not taking anything from you, Tom. You've already lost everything, and you don't even realize it." Tom's chest heaved in frustration, but he held his ground. "You don't know what you're talking about. You've never been in the trenches, Caroline. You think you can fix this from behind your desk, sitting there like some ivory tower politician?" She took a step toward him, her eyes narrowing. "And you think I'm the one who doesn't understand? You're so wrapped up in your own politics that you've forgotten what it means to lead. You're not even listening anymore. You just want to argue for the sake of arguing." The words hit harder than Tom anticipated. He faltered for a moment, his mind racing, trying to keep up with her, but she wasn't done. "You think I don't understand? You think I don't know what it's like to fight every day just like you? You're not the only one who has a stake in this, Tom. I'm not here to play games. I'm here to fix things. There was a quiet fury in her voice now, not the anger of someone lashing out, but the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of. Tom stared at her, something flickering in his eyes. He was about to speak again, but the words caught in his throat. Karoline had taken the wind out of his sails, and for the first time in the conversation, Tom found himself unsure. This wasn't going the way he expected. "Do you even know what it's like?" Tom finally muttered, more to himself than to her. He was tired, physically and emotionally drained, and it showed in the weariness that now crept into his voice. "Do you understand the pressure we're under?" Karoline's gaze softened for a split second, but she quickly regained her composure. "I understand more than you think, Tom. I just don't let it blind me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Tom stood there, silent, as if weighing her words against his own thoughts. Karoline, on the other hand, stood firm, waiting for him to either concede or continue the fight. Finally, Tom broke the silence, his voice lower now, filled with a kind of resignation. "You really think you can change this? You think you can just wipe the slate clean?" Karoline took a slow breath, meeting his eyes one last time. "I don't think I can. I know I can." And with that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Tom standing there, his anger still simmering, but also a deep, gnawing uncertainty. He had been blindsided, and for the first time, he wasn't sure if he could recover. The weeks after the meeting only seemed to deepen the rift between Karoline and Tom. Tom couldn't shake the words Karoline had left him with, and as much as he hated to admit it, they gnawed at him. Every time he thought about the conversation, every time he thought about her calm confidence, it unsettled him more. Karoline had proven a point that he couldn't ignore. He was playing a losing game. It didn't take long for their conflict to spill into the public eye. Karoline's face, once a relatively unknown image to the national stage, was now plastered across media outlets, her every word analyzed, her every action scrutinized. Her calm yet unflinching response to Tom's pressure made her a star. Her support base grew rapidly. Meanwhile, Tom, once seen as a seasoned political operator, began to feel the weight of public scrutiny. His own supporters were starting to question his methods, his ideas, and whether he was truly standing up for the farmers or just for his own survival. Tom sat in his office, a pile of documents scattered before him. He could barely focus. The TV in the corner of the room hummed, displaying Karoline's latest public speech. She was on the offensive again, confidently laying out her vision for the future, speaking directly to the farmers and their families. Tom's jaw clenched as he watched her, her words hitting like a punch to the gut. "She's everywhere," Tom muttered to himself, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "She's got them all fooled." His aide, who had been standing by the door, shifted uncomfortably. "Senator, we've got a response ready for her, but we need to act fast. The media is already framing this as a standoff. You need to make your move before she gets any more momentum." Tom's eyes narrowed. He could feel the pressure mounting. It wasn't just about the farmers anymore. It was about his legacy, his political future. He had to fight back. He couldn't let her take over the narrative. "Prepare the speech," he said, his voice cold. "And make sure we hit her hard. She's underestimating us. Time to remind her who's in charge." The next day, Karoline took the stage at a rally in North Carolina, surrounded by farmers and community leaders who had been echoing her calls for change. Tom's challenge had only fueled her resolve. She had seen the writing on the wall. Tom was beginning to falter, and now it was time to press her advantage. As she stepped up to the podium, the crowd cheered. She smiled briefly, raising a hand in acknowledgement before launching straight into her speech. "Senator Thom Tillis thinks he's got the answer," Karoline began, her voice confident and direct. "He believes tariffs are the solution to everything. But let's ask ourselves, how many more times are we going to let politicians play with our livelihoods like this? How many more years are we going to trust people who failed us?" The crowd erupted in applause, but Karoline wasn't done. She paused for a moment, letting the energy build. "Thom Tillis wants to blame everyone else for the mess we're in. But the truth is, this isn't about blaming anyone. It's about taking responsibility. It's about understanding that farmers need real solutions, not political games." The words hung in the air, and Tom's supporters in the crowd fidgeted uneasily. Karoline's message was hitting hard. She wasn't attacking him directly, at least not yet, but the implication was clear. Tom's time was up. Back in his office, Tom watched the rally live. His fingers gripped the edge of his desk. She was doing it again, undermining him with every calculated word. He could feel his temper rising. but he held it in check. If he reacted now, he'd only make it worse. But he knew one thing for sure. He had to take control of this narrative, fast. The televised debate was set. The tension between Karoline and Thom had reached its peak, and both sides were preparing for the inevitable confrontation. The stage was set in a packed auditorium, the air electric with anticipation. Thom walked out first, his head held high, but his posture was rigid. He had a point to prove tonight. Karoline followed shortly after, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to Thom's intensity. The moderators introduced the debate, but the audience knew what they had come for: the battle between two political titans. Karoline took her seat, giving Thom a brief, measured glance. He, in turn, glared at her, but it was clear he was beginning to feel the weight of the moment. The first question came from the moderator. Senator Tillis, you've been a vocal proponent of Trump's tariffs. How do you justify the impact they've had on local farmers? Thom's eyes hardened, and he leaned forward into the microphone, speaking with the confidence of a man who believed his words could turn the tide. Look, these tariffs aren't about punishing farmers. They're about standing up to China. They're about protecting American interests in a global economy. Sometimes, sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. Karoline's lips curled into a subtle smile. The greater good? Senator, farmers aren't a sacrifice to be made. They're the backbone of this country. They've been struggling for years, long before tariffs were even introduced. You're not protecting them. You're abandoning them. Thom's eyes flashed with anger. He wasn't used to being interrupted like this, especially not in front of a national audience. And what do you propose, Karoline? That we just open up the floodgates? Let China walk all over us? That's the problem, Karoline responded coolly. You think the only solution is fighting fire with fire. But you've been fighting this fight for too long, Thom. It's time for a different approach, one that doesn't put the livelihoods of our farmers at risk. Thom's face reddened, his fists clenched under the table. You think you have all the answers, don't you? You think you can just waltz in here and fix everything with your speeches? I'm not here for speeches, Thom, Karoline countered. I'm here to fix what you've broken. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their truth. The audience was silent, hanging on every exchange, feeling the rising tension. Karoline's calm demeanor was a stark contrast to Thom's growing frustration. She wasn't letting him control the narrative, and that terrified him. Thom leaned forward, his eyes locked on her. You can't fix this with empty promises, Karoline. Farmers need real solutions, not someone telling them what they want to hear. And you think you've been giving them real solutions? Karoline shot back. You've been giving them smoke and mirrors, Thom. You've been playing politics while they've been left to suffer, the audience murmured, and Thom's face twisted into a sneer. You want to talk about suffering, Karoline? You think I don't care? You think I don't see the same thing you see? You've never been in the trenches, Karoline. You don't understand the pressure. I understand more than you think, Karoline said, her voice low and firm. I've seen what happens when you prioritize politics over people. The room went quiet. Thom was seething now, his hands gripping the sides of his podium as if trying to keep himself from lashing out. Karoline remained unfazed, her eyes unwavering. Then let's see what you're really made of, Thom, Karoline said softly, her words cutting through the tension like a knife. The night before the televised debate, Thom sat in his hotel room, staring at the walls, feeling the weight of the pressure bearing down on him. The room was dimly lit, and his reflection in the mirror seemed like a shadow of the man he once was. His hand gripped the glass of whiskey on the table, but he didn't drink. He couldn't. Tomorrow was the day that would determine everything. The campaign, his career, his legacy, everything was on the line. He had tried everything to regain control. The media had been relentless, the whispers of doubt in his own party growing louder by the day. He'd thrown punches at Karoline in interviews, but it hadn't been enough. He had underestimated her, her composure, her intelligence. And now, standing before millions of people tomorrow, he would have to face her again. And this time, there would be no room for mistakes. The next evening, the debate hall was packed. The air was thick with anticipation. Karoline entered the stage with her usual calm demeanor, but her mind was razor-sharp, focused on the task at hand. She was ready. This was her moment. The culmination of everything she had been fighting for. Thom walked onto the stage after her, his face taut with tension. His eyes were harder now, his jaw clenched, every movement calculated. He knew he was on the verge of losing everything, but he wasn't going to let Karoline stand over him without a fight. The moderator introduced the candidates, but everyone knew that the real battle was between the two of them. The first question came quickly. Senator Tillis, after your recent comments about Karoline Leavitt's stance on tariffs, how do you justify the pressure you've been putting on her? Are you trying to tear her down? Thom stood tall, not missing a beat. This isn't about tearing anyone down. This is about standing up for our farmers. Karoline can sit there and tell you that tariffs are the problem, but she's ignoring the bigger picture. The truth is, China has been undercutting American businesses for years, and if we don't take action, we're going to lose everything. He paused, looking directly at Karoline. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it like she does. This is a hard fight, and it's going to take tough decisions. No one's going to hand us the future we want. We have to fight for it. The audience responded with applause, but Karoline didn't flinch. She wasn't about to let him win this round. When it was her turn, Karoline stood and faced the crowd, speaking with the same calm confidence that had carried her this far. Thom, you've spent the past few weeks painting this as a battle for the farmers. But you're not fighting for them. You're fighting for a broken system. You're fighting to maintain the same old political games that got us into this mess. She turned her gaze to Thom, her words now sharper. The farmers didn't ask for tariffs. They didn't ask for a trade war. They asked for a leader who would fix the system, not continue the cycle of destruction. You're out of touch, Thom. You've been pushing the same narrative for years, and it's not working anymore. Thom's face tightened as the crowd responded with a mix of murmurs and applause. He could feel the tide turning. Karoline wasn't just attacking him. She was dismantling his entire platform. Let's be clear, Karoline continued, her voice unwavering. This isn't about China. This is about leadership. And right now, we're lacking it. The room was electric with tension, the clash of their words hanging in the air. Thom opened his mouth to respond. But before he could, Karoline delivered her final blow. You want to talk about fighting for the future? Then why are you still stuck in the past, clinging to outdated policies that are hurting the very people you claim to protect? Maybe it's time to let someone who actually has a vision for the future lead this country. Thom was stunned. The words hit harder than he had anticipated. He had tried to bait her, to make her slip up, but instead she had calmly, methodically shredded his arguments. He felt something in his gut twist, a mix of frustration and humiliation. He tried to recover, but it was clear that the debate had shifted. The camera zoomed in on him, capturing the moment of vulnerability. He couldn't just go on the attack anymore. Karoline had changed the game. He had nothing left to say. The audience was on edge, waiting for his response. But it didn't come. Instead, Thom fumbled for words, his voice faltering. He was on the ropes, and he knew it. The moderator, sensing the shift, moved to the next question. Thom's face flushed as Karoline stood tall, confident, a stark contrast to his visible disarray. The aftermath of the debate was swift. The media was abuzz with reactions, and Thom's camp could feel the pressure mounting. Karoline had clearly won the night, and the tide was now decisively in her favor. She had shown up not just as a challenger, but as a force to be reckoned with. In the days following, Thom's approval ratings took a nosedive. His once loyal supporters were beginning to defect, uncertain whether they could continue to back a candidate who seemed so out of touch with the people he claimed to serve. Thom found himself alone in his office, staring out the window, wondering where it had all gone wrong. He had underestimated her, and now it felt like everything was slipping away. His campaign was crumbling, and he didn't know how to stop it. Meanwhile, Karoline was gaining momentum. The media couldn't stop talking about her, and her popularity surged. She was everywhere, on television, in the papers, on social media. The narrative had shifted. Karoline was now seen as a rising star, a fresh alternative to the entrenched political powers that had long controlled the system. Thom's name was slowly fading into the background, eclipsed by her rapid ascent. Thom's phone buzzed on his desk. It was a message from one of his closest allies. He opened it, reading the words carefully. It's over. They're pulling support. It's time to step down. Thom stared at the screen, his heart sinking. He had always known politics was a game of survival. But this felt different. This wasn't just losing a campaign, this was losing everything. The next day, Thom made the call. It was over. He had fought a hard fight, but in the end, he couldn't match Karoline's resolve. Her message had resonated too strongly with the people. He was done. Karoline, on the other hand, stood on the steps of the Capitol, looking out at the horizon. The battle was far from over, but the first victory had been hers. The tide had turned. She had not only survived Tom's pressure but had completely dismantled him. And now, with her supporters rallying behind her, she was ready for the next challenge. But as she stood there, the weight of it all settled on her shoulders. The fight had just begun, and she knew that Tom's defeat was only the beginning of a much bigger struggle. She turned and walked back inside, the doors closing behind her. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. She wasn't backing down. It had been 2 weeks since the debate, and Tom had disappeared from the public eye. His campaign, once brimming with energy and confidence, was now a sinking ship. Every morning, he woke up to fresh headlines questioning his integrity, his commitment to the people. Even his most loyal supporters were beginning to doubt him, and the calls for him to step down had grown louder. In the quiet of his office, Tom paced back and forth, his fingers clenching and unclenching. He had tried everything, fighting back through press conferences, holding impromptu rallies. But it was clear. Karoline had taken control of the narrative, and the public had already chosen their side. Tom sat at his desk, his hands trembling as he picked up the phone. The voice on the other end was cold, familiar. A party insider who had been with him from the beginning. "Tom," the voice said, "it's time. We're pulling support. You need to step down. For your own good, for the party's good." Tom stared at the phone, the weight of the words sinking in. He knew it was coming. He'd felt it the moment he faltered during that debate. He had made too many mistakes. But hearing the words spoken aloud, hearing the finality in the voice of someone he thought was an ally, it hit him harder than he expected. "I can't just walk away," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, you can," came the reply. "You've already lost." The line went dead. Tom sank back in his chair, staring blankly at the wall. For a moment, he wasn't a politician, a senator, or even a man in power. He was just a man who had been beaten by a younger, sharper opponent who had known how to play the game better than he ever had. The following day, Tom made his decision. His resignation speech was short, devoid of the usual political flourishes. The words came out reluctantly, but they were final. "After much thought," he began, his voice barely audible to the few people gathered before him, "I've decided to step down from my campaign for re-election. It's clear that the people of this state want change, and I'm no longer the one to deliver it." The camera flashed, capturing the moment for the media. His supporters, now a dwindling number, clapped awkwardly. Tom didn't look up. He didn't feel the weight of their applause. He was already a ghost in his own life, fading out of the picture. The news broke quickly. Media outlets were quick to seize on Tom's downfall, comparing him to Karoline Leavitt, whose campaign was gaining momentum faster than anyone had anticipated. While Tom's supporters scrambled to pick up the pieces, Karoline was already poised to take the next step in her political journey. Meanwhile, Karoline stood before a crowd of farmers, community leaders, and supporters, her smile wide, her confidence undeniable. She had won. But in her eyes, the battle was far from over. Tom's resignation was a victory, but it wasn't the end. "We did it!" Karoline said, her voice ringing out over the crowd. "We proved that when we stand together, when we fight for what's right, we can bring about real change. But this is just the beginning. There's more work to do." The crowd erupted in applause, but Karoline's eyes were already focused on the next challenge. Tom might be gone, but there would be others, other politicians, other issues to face. She wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. She knew that her victory over Tom was only a piece of a much larger puzzle, and she was ready to take on whatever came next. Karoline's rise in popularity had sent shockwaves through the political world. Her name was now synonymous with change, with fresh ideas, and with the promise of a better future. Her supporters hailed her as a new kind of leader, one who was unafraid to challenge the establishment and take on powerful figures like Thom Tillis. But with that rise came new pressures. The political establishment wasn't going to sit idly by while she stormed the gates. Karoline soon found herself facing a new set of challenges, this time from within her own party. Politicians who had once seen her as an ally now started to question her vision, her strategies, her methods. The same people who had praised her in the early days were now calling her too radical, too unpredictable. "Karoline, you've made your point," one of her senior advisors told her in a private meeting. "But now it's time to play it safe. We need to solidify our base. You can't keep attacking the establishment like this." Karoline's gaze hardened. "I didn't get this far by playing it safe. I got here by doing what was right." Her advisor looked uncomfortable. But we need to think about the long term. We need to get elected, Karoline. I'm thinking long term, she shot back. And long term means not backing down, not compromising on what's important. If that means ruffling feathers, then so be it. The tension was palpable in the room, but Karoline stood firm. She wasn't going to let anyone tell her to back down now. She had fought too hard to get here, and she wasn't going to let anything or anyone derail her. But the cracks were starting to show. The establishment was pushing back harder than she anticipated, and there were moments when Karoline found herself wondering if she had underestimated the system she was fighting against. The media, too, began to turn. What had once been praised now had a more critical edge. Was Karoline Leavitt just another political upstart, or was she something more? She would find out soon enough. As the weeks passed, Karoline faced a new set of obstacles. Thom's fall from grace had been swift, but it was only the beginning of the larger political battle. Karoline's rise had been meteoric, but now she had to navigate the complexities of governing and maintaining her hold on power. Despite the challenges, her popularity only continued to grow. The people saw her as someone who didn't compromise, someone who fought for them, someone who understood the real struggles of everyday Americans. And as she prepared to launch her next phase of reforms, she felt the weight of her role as a leader. One day, Karoline stood on the steps of the Capitol, gazing out at the horizon. She had won the battle against Thom, but she knew the war was far from over. The political landscape was changing, and she was at the center of it. But she also knew that with every victory came new challenges. She wasn't just fighting for a seat at the table anymore. She was fighting for the future. Behind her, the Capitol loomed, a symbol of the power she was about to seize. She took a deep breath, knowing that everything she had fought for had led her here, to this moment. And as she turned to walk back inside, she knew the world was watching. She had proven herself in the toughest of battles, and now the real work would begin.